Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers. Today is the 23rd of March, the year of our Lord 2023. And it is the 10th anniversary of the tragic death of the great polymath, entrepreneur, Russian oligarch, and knower and practitioner of this philosophy, Dr. Boris Berezovsky. And tonight we're doing a special show here at the Real Javier Novoa, from the Real Javier Novoa studio here in Texas, commemorating his great life, mourning his passing, and we're going to try to distill the principles that he used and that he indeed told us in one of his own great writings. And we want to try to apply them to our lives and to our business. And we also want to go over the lives of some other successful people in comparison to him. And so, my friends, it's going to be a very interesting show. And I think we're starting out with the Hymn of the Cherubim by Tchaikovsky, which is very appropriate, I believe, to commemorate and to respect the life of this great man. So, my friends, I am Javier Novoa. Welcome to the JN Show. You don't want to miss today's special episode, dedicated to the honor of Mr. Boris Berezovsky. Listening to a beautiful piece of classical music here as I prepare my materials. Ladies and gentlemen, it was 10 years ago today that the great man was found dead in his house, or what was his ex-wife's house. The mystery of his murder has still not been solved. Some said that it could have been agents of Putin, the Russian government. Others say that he could have perhaps committed suicide. I don't buy that. But on this show, we're not taking a position as to the cause of his death, because this show is not political. What we want to do is try to grasp every lesson that we can from his life and commemorate his life, which was indeed full of action, philosophy, great pursuits, and energy. And we want to see if we ourselves can learn from his energy and absorb some of that energy into our own endeavors. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin in earnest and without further ado with the Javier Novoa Show. We're living in very interesting times where politics and business intersect. And here's a story that is representative of modern times. Indeed, this man, who was a member of the academic establishment in Soviet Russia, the top of his field in almost every endeavor he pursued, he reinvented himself in midlife. And he went from being a man on a very meager and low salary to becoming probably the richest man in Russia. He was the perennial Russian oligarch. Indeed, he invented the term Russian oligarch. And he was the leader of a group of men who took Russia by storm after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And indeed, Vadim Zeland, in his book Reality Transurfing, does discuss these men. And he says that there were a group of men who took these principles and applied them while everyone else was living in the squalor and the suffering of the collapse of the socialist system. Because under socialism, even though there is no rational economic calculation in socialism, and even though the common denominator is poverty, and there are very few that could get ahead economically according to the worldly communist system, that everyone was, to a certain extent, taken care of in their basic needs. Well, that came crashing down when the Soviet Union collapsed. And many people fell by the wayside. It took a long time for many people to navigate the new world of capitalism, to understand the new order, and to bring a new normality to their lives. But there were a group of men, a very small group of men who had been former academics, military officials, and government officials, and who were conditioned from a young age to excellence, even though before it was not economic excellence, it was academic excellence or excellence in the hierarchy. They still had the mindset of excellence, and they did not focus upon the lack. They did not focus upon the fear of the chasm left by the fall of socialism. Rather, they took advantage of the opportunity, because we do know that in Chinese, the same word for crisis, or the word for crisis and opportunity, is the same word. These men knew that, and they took advantage of it, and they utilized the principles. And we're going to go through writings of this great man, his own writings, his own words, and then we're going to distill the principles, and we're going to very briefly illustrate how he lived these principles. First, I just wanted to do a brief resume of the man's life. That he was born on the 23rd of January, 1946, and of course tragically transitioned, even though we know on the spiritual level it's not tragic, but from a human level it was tragic, on the 23rd of March, 2013. And of course, he was a member of the minority Jewish community in the Soviet Union, which meant automatically he said this in his own words and in many interviews, he wanted to enter politics. But the Jews, according to the social norms at the time, they were not encouraged to enter politics, so he excelled where they could excel at that time, and that was in the sciences. He had studied mathematics and became a mathematician. Indeed, he studied decision theory in the Soviet Union, and he in fact published many papers, and he became a member of the prestigious Russian Academy of Sciences. And as he said in one prominent interview, putting one over Putin, he said that even Brezhnev wanted to become a member of the Russian Academy of Sciences, but the standards were so strict that he was not able to do so. But Berezovsky was able to do so through great focus. And he even said that he knew exactly the path that he was going to take in life from the age of 13. He had planned this all out. But what he did not foresee was the collapse of the Soviet Union. He always wanted to go into business because, indeed, his community, even in a communist country, they were geared towards business, and they taught their children that they could have it all, and they taught their children the very mindsets that we train in this